on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his
Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you on this Halloween weekend?
Ooh, I feel spooky.
Do you feel
Ooh,
spooky?
boobish.
Can you believe that October is, well, essentially over?
I don't know what happened to this entire year.
This whole month has just zipped by.
Yeah, October's a great time of year. You got the changing of the seasons. Fall rears its ugly head.
The veil is thin.
Yes, everything gets spooky and creepy, and then boom, it's gone.
It's gone.
The next thing you know, they're trying to shove a turkey down your throat.
Who's they?
The powers that be.
The turkey shovers of
Yeah.
America?
And close behind that, Santa's up your butt.
Can I just admit that I'm not a big fan of turkey?
Yeah, I mean, I eat it here or there. Eating it once a year is fine for me.
Yeah, once a year I'm good. But I don't really want to eat turkey regularly.
But I must say, some people are, doing some pretty interesting things with turkey nowadays.
How are they doing?
Yeah, lots of injecting and stuffing. You just,
Brining.
ooh, yeah, just soak in that brine.
Yeah, I guess we just got them basic bitch turkeys and they're not that good.
Maybe we just cook shitty turkey.
Maybe that's the problem. Oh, well, wrapping up Halloween. Hope you had a wonderful, spooky holiday. We have a case actually that's centered around Halloween.
We do.
We'll get into that in a moment, but wanted to give a big shout out to our new patron, Justin. Thank you for pledging your support at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast and sponsoring today's show.
Thank you, Justin.
Dylan, are you ready?
I cannot wait to dip my toe in the pool of true crime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to get in that Mountain Murders Wayback Machine all the way back, Dylan, 1992.
Ooh, that's that makes me feel old because that's a real long time ago now.
Do you remember 1992?
Oh, yeah.
What do you remember about it?
Let's see.
Anything specifically?
No, I must have been, 14-ish or so?
I was in the 6th grade.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So 1992, just refresh your memory a little. Starring Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner was on the big screen.
Yeah.
You love that one, don't you?
Oh, I remember seeing it in the theater.
A special date?
It was
A special date.
It was the date movie of the year, I believe, that year.
Dylan was on a very special date.
And we'll share that with the patrons.
We will not. Okay, moving along. Disney's Aladdin, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York were also the big hits of the year. REM's Automatic for the People, Madonna's Erotica albums dropped in 1992. Images of Sinead O'Connor, the singer, ripping up a photograph of the Pope on Saturday Night Live made headlines, while a heated presidential election was looming against the 41st President, George H.W. Bush, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, and entrepreneur Ross Perot.
Oh, yeah, let me show you something. We're going to run America like a business. We're going to make money.
And in Oil City, Pennsylvania, children were preparing for annual Halloween celebrations. Kids across the country were getting their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle and their Batman and Catwoman costumes ready.
Oh, my God. 92 was banging, dude.
92 was banging.
Okay.
Oil City is located in Venango County, Pennsylvania, known for its once bustling petroleum industry, where there were headquarters for Pennzoil, Quaker State, and Wolf's Head Motor Oil companies. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Oil City was a thriving community, but by the 1990s, the big oil companies had relocated their headquarters elsewhere, and thousands of lucrative jobs dried up. And this seemed to be a common happenstance in the 90s. A lot of these big industries that, brought middle-class employment, good-paying jobs, solid incomes to these working families dried up.
Yes.
We saw that in our own community with some manufacturing.
Definitely, and that was to only be accelerated by the North American Free Trade Agreement under the Clinton administration, but it was actually drafted under the Bush Senior's administration. So yes, that was a time. A lot of good jobs leaving, which affected many areas in various ways.
Well, in 1992, around 11,000 residents called Oil City home. The once booming city's population dwindling. Still, Oil City was a quiet town, the kind of neighborhoods that were lined with Victorian homes and churches on every corner where neighbors threw up a hand as you passed by. So picture a small town.
So it was close-knit communities. A lot of people worked in the same industries, same factories, I'm going to assume. And yeah, it just sounds like a cool place to live. Good jobs, good money.
Shauna Melinda Howe was born July 11th, 1981. Her parents eventually split, and Shauna lived with her mother Lucy and later stepfather John in Oil City. They were a working-class family. From reports, Shauna maintained a good relationship with both her mother and biological father Robert. Though there's not a great deal of information regarding him, he seems to maintain a private life. Now, I do know they had 4 children together, including Shauna, but other than that, I couldn't find much else about Robert. Tuesday, October 27th of 1992 seemed like any other day. 11-year-old Shauna had attended 7th Street Elementary School and was looking forward to a Halloween party sponsored by her local Girl Scout troop. Typically, the Girl Scout meetings were held at the Free Methodist Church on Wilson Avenue. That morning, Shauna had reminded her mother, Lucy, that the Girl Scouts planned to visit a retirement home to perform a choral show for residents and host a Halloween party. When she returned home from school, Shauna dressed in her costume. It was a leotard, sort of teal and black stripes. Some reports called it a bodysuit. She wore tights and gloves because she was going to be a gymnast.
Yeah, I must say on a side note, right quick, the kids were really enjoying themselves this Halloween because last year, we were full blown COVID, nobody got to do anything, and yeah, so the kids were having fun, and it's good to see. It always brings a smile to my face when you see the little ones with their costumes going door to door getting the candies.
They're just having the most fun.
Yeah, they have so much fun.
They're living their best life.
It's true.
I'd love to see all the costumes. Some parents get really creative.
Yeah, you can always tell the parents who lean into it, I guess, and the ones who maybe just going through the motions a bit. They're at the end of my children's, age window to be trick-or-treating. I'm just like, man, screw you. I don't want to go trick-or-treating. I want to watch movies and eat popcorn.
And that's all you wanted to do?
Yeah, damn those kids.
Yeah, my daughter wanted to go trick-or-treating today, actually. I did let her go, and I said, well, what are you going to say if people comment on your age because you are 16? And she's like, well, I'm going to say, would you rather me be egging your house?
Oh, good answer.
And I was like, okay, well,
Trick.
I guess that works.
Or treat. I'm telling you what.
Well, you know what? If they want to be kids, I feel like letting them prolong childhood and innocence as much as possible, right? These kids grow up so fast today.
Well, here's the thing. If I'm handing out candy, I'm not going to say anything. And, to a kid who comes up, I might be older. They still want to trick or treat.
Right.
Let them have some fun.
So when it comes to creativity, I like Shauna's costume. She's got the leotard, the tights, the gloves. She's a gymnast. I remember, maybe it's when we were kids growing up, like a gymnast was like a really cool, like, icon or like hero. Like all the little girls loved watching the Olympics. We loved the gymnasts. They were like, celebrity status.
Well, I think back then, because there was more limited entertainment and things, the Olympics seemed like a lot bigger deal. Mary Lou Retton, she's everywhere, sponsorships.
Wheaties.
Famously the Wheaties boxes, obviously, but not just that. She's making appearances. She's on all the daytime talk, morning shows. And I think they were a lot more like a hero.
Yeah, like the gymnasts and the figure skaters, I feel like were like celebrities.
It's true.
Like we all wanted to be a gymnast or we all wanted to be an ice skater, a figure skater.
Well, I think that comes from seeing someone do something that a very small, limited amount of people can do worldwide, right? either
Yeah.
of those things. Some very advanced ice skating or the gymnast routines.
So, like most kids, Shauna loved Halloween. It was something she looked forward to all year round. Her mother, Lucy, always dressed the kids in costumes, and they were allowed to go trick or treating for candy. So, a big deal. Shauna departed home around 4:30 to head over to the Girl Scout party. Lucy worked second shift that evening, and she was supposed to arrange a ride for Shauna, but forgot to do so. It slipped her mind. Shauna's curfew was 8 p.m. So around 7:30 p.m., Shauna and her friend Joey departed the Girl Scout party together. The two girls eventually separated at the corner of First Street. Shauna was afraid of the dark, initially hesitant to walk the remainder of the way home alone. Her friend Joey suggested that Shauna walk to her house and they could get Joey's parents to give Shauna a ride home. But Shauna turned down this invitation. Instead, she turned the corner, parting ways with her friend. It would be the last time that Shauna was seen alive.
Oh my God.
I know. This is like such a sad story and like literally, I think, every parent's nightmare.
Well, yeah, and then after the fact, when something happens to your friend, I think you get a lot of people that has these what ifs, and if only I tried harder to get them to come home with me, or maybe if we had walked, with them, you know, they'd been safe. But that's very tragic and sad.
But it's really not very far from her house. So it's understandable that Shauna would say, like, no big deal. I'll just walk the rest of the way, even though maybe she was afraid of the dark, didn't really want to do the walk by herself. It wasn't a great distance.
So a matter of some blocks kind
Yeah,
of thing.
kind of like just around the corner down the street, I mean, it was a pretty close walk from where they parted ways. Dan Payton, or Padden, was an Oil City local, and he was out walking on that dark evening when, on the corner of Reed Street and West First Street, he saw a man wearing a ball cap grab a little girl and drag her into a small red car.
Wow.
The little girl was screaming, and this was before cell phones, so Padden ran from door to door pleading for help, asking someone to please call the police.
So he witnesses a full-on kidnapping
Yes.
or abduction, but yet he can't just instantly. I think we have to remember that in ways we're lucky nowadays. In some ways, that's a bad thing to be fully connected all the time.
Constant contact.
You can instantly reach out for help or let someone know that you need help. But yeah, back then.
But when it comes to an emergency situation, the fact that we are wired to the gills, we all have a cell phone. I mean, that definitely helps, right?
Yeah, so this guy's frantically trying to find help, screaming probably at the top of his lungs, banging on doors, literally. So yeah, what a scene.
Yeah, kind of like running up and down the street trying to find someone home, someone that will answer the door. Meanwhile, at home, Shauna's stepdad, John, was waiting for the little girl. When Lucy called the house to check on everything, John asked what time Shauna was supposed to be home from the party. It was after 8 p.m., and she had yet to arrive. Worried, Lucy phoned the scout leader and learned that Shauna had left the party with Joey around 7:30. She then phoned Joey, who explained that they had parted ways already, with Shauna walking in the direction of the Howe home. Now, by now, the family is very worried. John jumps into action, driving around the neighborhood trying to spot his stepdaughter. The time change had just happened, so it was fairly dark outside. With no sign of Shauna, John returned home and began calling area hospitals to see if there had been some kind of accident. Because again, this is pre-cell phone, and back in the day when someone was missing, you started calling around to hospitals checking.
Yeah, there's that cliche, the police, or the police, the hospitals, or what is there another one? Looking for a car wreck or something like that?
And that's literally what people would do, and that's what John did. Now, by 10 p.m., Lucy returned home frantic. She called police to report her daughter missing. When an officer arrived to take the report, he expressed that maybe Shauna was lost. It was dark outside after all, and maybe she had gotten confused walking home. However, the police radio started alerting that a man had witnessed a little girl being kidnapped, and this is how Lucy discovered her daughter had fallen victim to a crime.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine this poor mother?
And so it wasn't that much time elapsed, 30 minutes or so before they started getting worried and looking for her, right? About 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, I mean, she was due home by 8. It was a little after 8. She hadn't made it home yet. Her mom and stepdad are concerned. They're jumping into action, calling around. He's out in the car, driving around the neighborhood, looking for her. By 10, they've called the police. And as the officer is there taking the report, his radio starts buzzing with this information that a man had witnessed a child being kidnapped.
Oh my God. I don't know how you would even react in that situation.
Yeah, this woman is very strong. Just to be able to live through this situation and tell her story. She's done multiple interviews and she just is a very strong person. In a lot of missing persons cases, we see little action on behalf of law enforcement. But this is not the case here. Authorities quickly set roadblocks and alerted other agencies within a 100-mile radius that they were looking for a little girl in a small red car. Between 20 and 30 law enforcement officers were called in to conduct grid searches of the area where Shauna was last seen. They canvassed the area and interviewed potential witnesses. Lucy, along with her husband, they're a mess. She is pacing the floors all night waiting for any news of Shauna. The following day, when word spread that the little girl was missing, it seemed like the entire community was out searching for Shauna. Community volunteers were organized, and it was an emotional scene. Shauna Howe was Oil City's daughter. The whole town was invested in finding this little girl.
Now, that's pretty interesting. You have a very reliable witness to the abduction. You have a description of the man, might not be that good of a description, but the description of the car is a fairly good description. You know, a little red car, that's going to stick out. So you would hope, and then the police mobilizing quickly, setting up roadblocks, alerting everyone in a 100-mile radius, that's pretty good, especially at this time.
Pulling in other law enforcement agencies. They had the sheriff's department. They had the town.
The whole community.
Police. They had state troopers. I mean, they had, like I said, 20 to 30 different officers from various agencies on the scene to help with the situation.
Well, I don't think you could hope for any more from authorities and the community.
The weight of the situation seemed to rest solely on Lucy. Though she wanted to be out searching for her daughter, law enforcement urged her to stay at home in case a phone call came in. There could be some type of ransom call from a kidnapper. Now, I can't imagine the hopeless feeling she had. As a parent, we want to be there for our kids, protect them, and Lucy described it as feeling trapped, like a caged lion just walking in circles in the house.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have this, I guess, frantic kind of energy. You feel like you should be out actively looking for your child. Maybe you feel you might know your child better than the other people maybe searching for them. Might have better ideas of where to look, or these are the feelings you have. But they will always want you to be at home where you can answer questions for authorities, or, God forbid, I guess in the back of your mind, you hope she might just show up at home and you want to be there for them as well.
Right. Well, the search continued for Shauna until October 29th. The police were feeling intense pressure from the community. From daybreak till dark, hundreds of searchers were combing the area surrounding Oil City. And that's when the first break came in the case. The bodysuit that Shauna had been wearing was discovered in some woods in an area they called Coulter's Hole. Coulter's Hole is a secluded area on the river used for hunting, fishing, camping, swimming. It's about 8 miles from where Shauna was abducted. And I think I called it Coulter's Hole. It's actually Quarters Hole, but I heard some folks calling it Coulter's Hole. So I'm not 100% sure if it's Quarters Hole or Coulter's Hole, because there's a little bit of an accent.
Right.
So I'm going to call it Quarters Hole. That's kind of the information that I found, but it was kind of called both things. But it's a really secluded area, Dylan.
Well, this sounds like one of those places only locals would know about.
Right. So it's about 8 miles from where Shauna was abducted. John, Shauna's stepfather, is asked to confirm if this leotard or this bodysuit belongs to her. In an emotional admission, he tells them yes. The state police are called in, and the bodysuit is sent to a lab in Erie, Pennsylvania for testing. The test concludes there are several seminal spots, and though it's still the early stages of DNA, they do have this sample on file.
Yeah, I think at this point they could get blood type, maybe, or they could, maybe if they get the match, then they can match directly to the donor. I'm not even sure if it's that advanced at that point. But though this is a development, it's a disturbing development. Here's your child's clothes, basically, that she was wearing, and then on top of that, possibly semen on it. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, that's just so heartbreaking. I mean, it's good to find something, but that something would just, rip your heart out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, police are still hopeful that they will find Shauna alive. The area surrounding Quarters Hole becomes the location of interest, and new searches are conducted. As the Halloween holiday approaches, town officials make the call to cancel festivities. Not that many parents are keen to send their children out when a potential kidnapper is on the streets. So basically, Halloween gets canceled.
Well, I think that from a public safety standpoint, you don't know what's going
It's
on.
a smart call.
Someone literally saw a child being snatched off the street, so it's a good chance there's a child predator or someone like that around, and it'd be hard to even go out and have fun when everyone knows about this case, this poor little girl that's went missing.
It is on October 30th that a man named Bill Crabtree, who is camping in an area by a bridge, stumbles upon a heartbreaking scene. Now, at first, he's not sure what to make of it, but soon realizes he's found the body of a female child. Her body is partially submerged in a creek bed. Crabtree scrambles to contact law enforcement, who show up to the crime scene. Now, this is the same area where Shauna's bodysuit was found 24 hours earlier.
So she was in that area. And I was afraid this is what was going to happen. Because typically when a child's taken in this manner, I'm going to assume it's a child predator. It's not a family member. It's either typically a kidnapping is typically family member, something to do with custody, or someone that knows the child, right? And then when you have a random stranger, now we move on to child predator. And I think we all know, statistically speaking, that they typically within 6 to 9 hours, unfortunately, they have been killed, and
Well,
it's so horrible.
Right. It definitely is, Dylan, and you're jumping ahead a little bit because I'm going to touch on some of that later on.
I'm sorry.
Well, this area is like dark and isolated. There's a train trestle about 33 feet above the river. It is clear to law enforcement that someone tossed this child from above, from this bridge.
Okay.
However, this area had been searched only the day before, the exact same location. Someone had to return the night before, discarding Shauna under the cover of darkness. It felt like a taunt to police. Shauna's shoes were placed atop the trestle, facing in different directions, one pointing to the left, one pointing to the right.
So they want to make it obvious, it seems like almost, that, yeah, I came back and discarded this poor girl's body here where you guys have already been searching.
Yeah.
Because of the discovery of the leotard.
Shauna's body had scrapes on the knees. A medical examiner would later conclude the little girl had lived probably 5 to 10 minutes after being thrown from the bridge. That's right. She'd been alive when someone had thrown her off.
My God.
Thrown her over the bridge.
So she was still alive after outside of that typical window.
Yes.
Wow. That's scary too.
Yeah.
She's being abused the entire time.
This entire story is just so heartbreaking. After the discovery, Lucy's brother Keith, Shauna's uncle, makes his way to the family's home to deliver the worst news. When he informs Lucy they have found Shauna's body, witnesses describe the most horrific and pitiful wail screeching out of Lucy. Losing a child is never easy, but having a child murdered in such a brutal way is shattering.
Yeah, I don't even know how you recover from I guess you don't ever recover from that. But I don't even know how you continue living. I mean, I could only imagine the heartache and just all the questions in your head. And I mean, what do you even do? I mean, I guess you instantly go to anger and wanting justice. And I mean, I think the parents of these children, these types of victims, should be allowed, if they have the option of killing the person if they're proved to be the person who did this to their child.
Dylan Justice.
Medieval, you get the full on rolling cart of tools. Use anything that you like, and
Like a hostile situation?
yes.
Damn.
Yeah, so these people are monsters.
Well, they are.
I mean, they deserve no rights, and they deserve nothing good. They certainly don't deserve to sit in jail after they've done some poor child like this.
The Department of Dylan Justice.
Oh, shit.
Well, Bill Crabtree, the camper who found Shauna's body, becomes a person of interest. Not only did he discover the body in such a remote location after it had been searched, but he also drove a small red car, much like the one seen on the evening Shauna had been taken.
And this is typical procedure. If anyone, if you come home and find a loved one or family member in your house, they're going to take a hard look at you because of some reason. Some people like to involve them, or they think they're smarter than the cops, and want.
They like to revisit the crime scene. They want to somehow involve themselves in the case as a witness or in some way. You're absolutely right. However, Bill was very cooperative and the DNA sample did not match.
Okay.
Law enforcement realized that stranger abductions are rare, though not impossible. The police department immediately began obtaining DNA samples from all the male relatives in Shauna's family. Her stepdad, her teenage brother, uncles. The focus shifted to those who knew her at school, teachers, parents of her fellow Girl Scouts, anyone who knew Shauna. The police collected over 100 DNA samples. And you were right earlier, Dylan, when you said at this time they were obtaining DNA through blood tests. So they actually had to draw blood from each of these over 100 folks.
And I can imagine for the most part, everyone's willing. Yeah, sure. No problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cooperate fully. I know you got to ask these questions. At least you're investigating, and I would imagine that that didn't bother anyone. It wouldn't bother me to give a sample if I was connected to this child in some way.
Well, there was no match in the 100 samples taken. Not a single match. 11-year-old Shauna had been sexually assaulted, then murdered. This was horrific and not the kind of thing to happen in a relatively safe place like Oil City. Investigators were scrambling to find any lead, but eventually the case went cold. A person of interest pops up named Ted Walker. He is a man who was employed at a local pizza shop in town, and he knew Shauna. Ted was known for trying to hug not only Shauna, but other little girls who came into the restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, people kind of said he was creepy, overly affectionate with these children. Just kind of gave everybody, bad vibes.
Some people
He was just kind of an oddball.
Like kids, like genuinely just like kids in an okay way. But, I mean, that's going to throw up a red flag for me. Any grown man that is trying to be affectionate or hands-on with children that aren't his. I'm sorry. It's weird, even if it's not, nothing nefarious.
He also owned a red car, a tiny little red Chevette.
Okay, little red car.
A little red hatchback car. Yet, when Walker submitted his blood for DNA testing, he was eliminated. Ted Walker wasn't a match, but his name kind of kept popping up. Different people kept mentioning him to police. Now, the next set of suspects were known around town by their reputations for similar crimes, and let's be honest, because they were just shitbirds.
Okay.
Brothers Tim and Jimmy O'Brien were ruled out when an officer recalled that they had been in jail at the same time of, Shauna's kidnapping.
Okay, so it can't be the O'Brien brothers.
Right, but they were known for being pedophiles and having, attempted to abduct, women and sexually assault them, and they were just fucking creeps.
I mean, fuck those guys.
Yeah. There was another man who lived in the neighborhood. I believe his name was Michael Pruitt, who hitched a bus out of town after the discovery of Shauna's body. So that also like sent up red flags to police,
Yeah,
right?
that seems reasonable to me.
But with no suspects and little evidence to go on, Shauna Howe's case just putters out. Law enforcement is still following up on leads, but so far they've got nowhere. Yet the residents of Oil City can't forget what happened, and neither can police. Nearly 5 years to the date of Shauna's kidnapping, on October 29th of 1997, there is another kidnapping. 4-year-old Shanae Freeman was last seen playing outside the government housing apartment where she lived around 1 p.m. When she is discovered missing, about 100 people took part in the search, which was made even more urgent by this cold weather that was creeping in. The temperatures dropped into the 30s that night. The child was reported to be wearing only a cotton dress when she disappeared. One volunteer told the newspaper, quote, "I'm going to try to help this little girl because I have kids of my own and it really tears me apart." The unsolved murder of Shauna Howe was still looming in Oil City. Lucy and John joined the search for this little girl, Shanae Freeman. They understood the importance of finding her after what they'd gone through.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can imagine, but these parents know exactly how it feels, right? And they're just, it gives them some purpose and direction. I think they would be the best person to comfort that little 4-year-old's parents, don't you think?
Well, people were frantic once again, and the questions were racing. Had this killer struck again? Did Oil City have a child killer on the prowl? Once again, the community is gripped with fear. A boogeyman was stalking the children of Oil City. And like I said, 5 years to the date, almost, of Shauna's kidnapping.
Wow.
Right? So the following day, Shanae's body was found. She had been thrown into a ravine about a football field's length away from her apartment building. A teenager named Nicholas Bowen, who was 17, led police to her body in a wooded area. He became a person of interest after making some unusual statements during the initial search for Shanae. Bowen had been part of the search party looking for her. He had even hugged the girl's mother, comforted her, and said it would be okay.
Okay, well, that's not too strange.
Well, Bowen brutally raped the child, and he was charged with murder and handed a life sentence.
He killed her?
Yeah, he had been part of the search and had even hugged her mother and said it's all going to be okay, and just kind of kept making these strange statements. And finally, police just kind of asked him, what do you know? And he broke down and admitted that he had kidnapped her and killed her.
And led the police to her body.
Yep.
So there's a prime example of why the police take a hard look. It doesn't matter who you are that discover a body, and they're going to take a hard look at you and make sure you're not involved. And that's because it happens. It happens more often than people think.
Well, from what I understand, this teenager, Nicholas Bowen, had been at this apartment building and had been friends with some folks who lived there that also had other children. And he had spotted this little girl playing and lured her away. And he's 17.
I don't give a damn. I'll
So-
kill him. He deserves to die.
Well, he was charged with murder and handed a life sentence. However, he would have only been 12 at the time of Shauna's murder and disappearance, so he was not a viable suspect in her case. He tried to appeal his sentence in 2017, but it was unchanged by the judge on grounds that, he was a juvenile when this happened.
That doesn't
and
matter.
wanted resentencing, but the judge was like, nope, sorry, you're staying in jail.
You're a piece of shit. I don't care if you're 15. I don't care if you're 14 years old, 13. If you rape and murder a 4-year-old, some crimes in the juvenile mind and the way they react to things. I mean, even through murder in some situations, it's a gray area where you're not sure and they can change and reform. But this is child murder. Rape a 4-year-old. How do you even wrap your mind around that? Yeah, fuck you.
No, I totally agree.
I'd kill a 12-year-old if they did that.
Okay.
To a 4-year-old. I don't give a damn. I'll kick that kid right in the face.
Let's pause for a moment, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And we're back from our break, Dylan.
I'm so refreshed.
You're so goofy. In 1998, 6 years after Shauna's murder, a state detective named Richard Graham, who'd been a trooper at the time of her death, refused to give up the investigation. He had 72 other cases, but began reading into Shauna Howe's murder in his spare time. Reading through the case, he was dyslexic, by the way, so he was a very slow reader, admittedly. Took him a while to kind of comb over all the facts of the case. Notice there was a notation on the medical examiner's report that Shauna Howe had a shoe print or a shoe mark on her face.
Yeah, in a way, I think that gives him possibly an advantage when he's combing through a large file, an old file, to maybe notice something other people have missed.
Well, that's what he noticed, this shoe print or the shoe mark on her face. He went to the office, to the medical examiner's office to inquire about this note. It had been a violent rape, and the medical examiner confirmed there had been a shoe print on the victim's face. The medical examiner noted the scuffing on Shauna's knees indicated that she had possibly been held in captivity in some kind of small, confined space. This led Detective Graham to conclude that maybe they'd had it all wrong. They weren't looking for a single suspect, but likely two or more.
Oh, interesting.
Revisiting the case file, the name Ted Walker had come up several times. He matched the description of the tall, skinny suspect who had been seen wearing a ball cap, the same man that snatched Shauna. He also owned a small red Chevette, as I mentioned earlier. Some more digging showed that soon after Shauna's body was discovered, a mysterious fire had burned the red Chevette.
And this could also explain how, if there's more than one perpetrator, how Mr. Walker's DNA did not match. Very interesting.
Was he trying to cover up evidence? Walker lived in what was described as a flop house and was known to entertain a lot of young teenagers. Again, he had this reputation for hugging little girls at the pizza shop, and people just thought he was generally, just creepy. Made people feel uncomfortable.
So he's one of those guys who give most women that come into his presence, no matter what age they are, the creeps, if you will.
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, and is known to party with young teenagers.
That's gross.
Provide them, liquor. They could hang out at his house.
That's gross on so many levels.
Yeah.
Immature, and typically people that do that can't relate or don't want to relate to people their age. They're typically losers of a kind because, most real adults wouldn't take them seriously.
It definitely seems like a predator move.
And there's
right?
that, definitely.
Okay. Well, he was revisited for questioning. This time, he claimed that brothers Tim and Jimmy O'Brien had shown up to his house announcing that Shauna had been kidnapped. The story had always been that the O'Brien brothers were incarcerated at the time of her disappearance. So Detective Graham went back to check on those dates. This is when a major break comes in the case. The brothers had bonded out just before Shauna Howe's abduction. They had not been in jail on October 27th of 1992.
Okay, so you had an officer remembered that they were in jail.
Yes.
But they were these investigators, this group of investigators moved fast, tried to lock down the entire region from what it sounds like, but that was just a small oversight. I think they were in jail. Maybe they were in jail. Let's make sure when they got out.
Didn't follow up with that one small detail.
And I think that comes from there was a lot of tips, they were going in 10 different directions. Some of the things maybe seemed more promising than the O'Brien brothers. But it's interesting how all these people that did pop up as a person of interest at one time possibly seem to be connected.
Exactly. And again, it seems like a small detail to follow up, but it ends up being a big detail.
Well, it would be easy to check out, right? I mean, just one call to the jailer or the magistrate.
At this time, Jim O'Brien was in jail for the attempted kidnapping of a young woman. When detectives questioned him in jail and asked if he had submitted a DNA sample, Jim told them he needed to consult with his attorney first. However, he had been eating a piece of candy, and he left the wrapper behind on the table. So officers snatched the wrapper for testing, and the DNA was a match.
Really?
There had also been a fiber found on Shauna's clothing, like a hair fiber, that matched his brother Tim. Tim was also in jail for sexually assaulting children, a boy and a girl victim. So not only had the O'Brien brothers known Ted Walker, but they frequently hung out at his house.
So here you got these two possible persons of interest in one child's missing and abduction and murder, but then they're in jail for trying to assault other children. I mean, these guys got they look good for it, right? And now you have a DNA match and hair, which I must say, to this day, hair forensics is debatable. Some people say it's basically junk science. Some say it's way too speculative.
Right.
So but I mean, DNA is DNA, right? I mean, there's no arguing that.
Ted Walker changed his story multiple times, but eventually told of the events on October 27th of 1992. Ted stated that the three men were discussing plans to kidnap someone as a prank. They wanted to embarrass the local police force, whom they felt were always harassing them.
Well, it's because they're shitbirds.
Ted Walker was waiting on the street when he spotted Shauna Howe walking alone. He recognized her from the pizza shop. To disarm the child, he approached Shauna asking if she was selling Girl Scout cookies. That's when he grabbed the little girl and dragged her over to his red Chevette where the O'Brien brothers were waiting inside. Timothy O'Brien took control of the child, shoving her in the car. Ted Walker then went to another car, following the men to his house.
Well, I must say, I'm going to call bullshit as to the motivation to kidnap someone. All three of these people are creeps. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Their motivation is to get control of a child and abuse them.
I don't think that we can dispute that these men are just fucking creeps.
Right.
This is just some story that's likely been concocted by Ted Walker, who's changed his story multiple times to try to make himself look like he is not as involved, or it was a meaningless prank, it got out of control,
or
right?
Distance himself from the actual murder.
Right. So Ted Walker, like I said, he went to another car, got in, followed the men to his house. Once they were at Ted Walker's house, the brothers brought Shauna inside and took her upstairs to a bedroom. Ted claimed that he could hear Shauna struggling, screaming, and begging for help. Timothy O'Brien threatened Ted Walker's son, and that's when Ted left. Like, if you tell on us, if you try to help, if this little girl, if you go tell on us, whatever, we're going to kill your son.
Yeah,
so
whatever.
Ted's like, okay, and just left the house after that.
Don't call the cops or anything.
Then the O'Briens later took her to a wooded area where they kept her in a car overnight. And that's kind of when they realized the heat was on, because immediately the search starts for Shauna.
And they've locked down the area. Everyone's involved, the entire community. Cops, multiple jurisdictions, roadblocks, people stopping people, asking questions. So I'd say very quickly they felt the pressure.
At some point, they discarded Shauna from atop the trestle bridge. Because she'd been kept in the trunk, this explained the scuffed knees that she had.
So that investigator had it spot on, what he thought. And when he took the second look at this basically a cold case, kinda, right?
Yeah.
Some years later.
The men were arrested and their trial began in October of 2005. I'm sorry. Ted Walker took a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against the O'Brien brothers. 34-year-old James and 39-year-old Timothy pleaded not guilty. Apart from the DNA evidence, the medical examiners report that Shauna had tried to break her fall. And they could tell this, Dylan, from the medical report. She had a dislocated shoulder and a broken arm, which investigators and the medical examiner concluded showed that she had actually been alive when they threw her from the bridge, because she had intentionally tried to break her fall.
That sounds reasonable.
After a 2-week trial, the jury had a 16-hour deliberation before finding the brothers guilty. Ted Walker was given 20 to 40 years in prison for pleading guilty to third-degree murder and kidnapping. The O'Brien brothers were both given life without parole for second-degree murder, kidnapping, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping.
Okay, well, Ted got a plea, and typically when you hear that, you're like, damn it, because, he was involved, but he still got a pretty stiff sentence,
He did.
20 to 40 years. That's great. And the two brothers, the O'Brien shitbirds, should have gotten death. They should have been killed, shot out behind the courthouse that day.
Well, I'm not sure the circumstances, how they were convicted of second-degree murder and that, first-degree murder charges were dropped.
Well, yeah, because this was definitely planned.
Right?
Right. So, I guess you could argue from a lawyer's standpoint that they only intended to kidnap. That doesn't, and abuse, not kill. I don't get it either. It should be death. It should be a death sentence. It should be a death sentence, period. And one where you're dead in a matter of months. It should be like a special track for people who harm children like this. You don't even get the usual appellate courts and all that. You get one shot, one objective review by a third party outside of the courtroom where you were convicted, and then we put you down like a dog in the street.
Well, by then, Shauna's family had moved to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, but they made trips back to Oil City for the trial. After the verdict, Lucy said, quote, "This is justice. I still have a hole in my heart, but I needed it to be solved. They took a little girl's life. They spent 12 years living their lives. My daughter would have been 24, but what does she have? Nothing."
Yeah, and I'm glad that this family got closure. And it definitely made the community there in that area safer. No doubt about that.
But 13 years? That is a long time for these individuals to be out in the streets committing more crimes.
Yeah, and
victimizing more women and children.
And they did during that period.
And they did.
Right.
The O'Briens, mother and sister, maintained their innocence, and they released a typed statement to the press that said, quote, "Our boys did not do this crime."
Yeah, and they didn't do the other crimes they were already in jail for multiple times. They were in jail for attempting to assault and kidnap other children, right, when they were, finally picked up for this. I get it's your family, but at what point? I would not back my family members. Of course, I think people know we feel strongly about these types of crimes. I would not back you at all.
Well, these men have been in and out of jail. They were basically menaces to this community.
Right.
They were known by law enforcement. They've victimized multiple women and children.
Right.
They're both in jail for committing other crimes.
Against women and children.
When they're arrested and charged with Shauna Howe's murder, how are you going to come out and say, my boys didn't do this? Anyway, I thought I would add that in there because I think we can see probably why these two knuckleheads are the way that they are.
Well, you have people around you that enable.
Some enabling ass family members.
That are not realistic. They don't call it like they see it. I would pull my family member aside and be like, I'm going to kill you. Okay? Because you're hurting children and women.
I'm going to kick your ass. Right?
I'm going to kill you. Kick.
Oh.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
Jason's come for your ass.
Well, I thought this was a fascinating case. Just in time for Halloween. It's a really sad story. But I'm glad that Shauna's family and Shauna finally got some justice in this case, even though it did take some time.
Yeah, it's really sad, and it's just another case where, there's probably 1,000 times those kids walk those same streets, split ways at that same corner, and it just took one time for monsters to be waiting around the corner for this poor little girl. And I think it always reminds me that you just never know. It's statistically improbable for your family to be affected like this by this type of crime and murder.
But not impossible.
But it's not impossible, and you simply do not know when or where it could happen. So I would implore everyone to stay vigilant, Don't live in a state of constant fear. But if your gut instinct goes off or the red flags or any of that, if you know someone's creepy, just, be extra vigilant.
Well, hug your kids extra close and,
And
just maybe keep an extra eye on them.
and be glad that they're still there and nothing this horrible's happened to them, because my heart goes out every time we have a story like this to the poor families. And I was afraid when you started this story that it may not have a resolution. But fortunately, multiple monsters were taken off the street. And I hope they got their ass kicked every single day in jail.
Well, I know sometimes we tend to give law enforcement a hard time in some of these cases, especially when it comes to missing persons, missing children. A lot of times they're kind of slow, they drag their feet, they botch the investigation. But I have to say, the law enforcement officers that were involved in Shauna's case from day one, they jumped into action. They were doing everything they could, and they didn't give up. If it had not been for the amazing work of Detective Graham, her case may have never been solved, or
Yeah.
it may have been, quite some years. But I think just having those dedicated officers who are so impacted by something like this that they just can't let it go.
Yeah, they did a great job, and yes, they didn't double check the date if the O'Brien brothers were truly in jail. Sometimes I think we forget as well that all these investigators are human, and we all make mistakes, and it doesn't make us bad people. But I do believe they were trying hard as they could. That one little piece of information kind of slipped through the cracks. But I think that was because they were trying so hard and covering such a wide area. And I'm sure they had hundreds of tips. Everyone thinks they see the little girl here and there. We know how that goes. But I think it's very admirable, these officers who just can't let a case go. I've even seen cases where they took the evidence and files home with them. And that's the only reason that they're still available. Because, typically, the evidence rooms are cleaned out after years and decades. They throw things away. And a lot of times that's the reason a cold case or something is solved. And it's because of an investigator's relentless pursuit of it, or just never letting it go. Or when they go to retire, it's that one case they couldn't get out of their mind.
Exactly.
And I think that is so admirable.
Well, and what's so unique about Shauna's case is we hear they have DNA evidence, and you automatically think, okay, this is going to be an easy slam dunk case. But as we see here, that is not so. It took years to find a match. Hundreds of DNA samples submitted in this case, and look how long it took to finally get a match. But they were able to and get that break in the case. And I'm just really glad that her family got some resolution. It's a really sad story, but I thought it was an important case to cover this time of year.
Thank you for that, Heather. That was
No problem, Dylan.
an interesting story, a sad story.
So
and,
we were on our break and we missed some major true crime news. So one of the things I know we're a little behind on was the whole Brian Laundrie being found.
they done found his remains.
Right?
Man, how about that? His parents were out there on site finding stuff.
Yeah.
Man, those parents just don't stop being in the news.
They don't. But wow, so that was something that definitely was kind of mind-blowing while we were on our break.
Okay, so now the question to everyone is they're like, well, he's not going to pay for what he did. We won't find out exactly what happened, but we have a theory as to what happened, don't we?
What's our theory, Dylan?
Well, I explained it to you, and you seem to have agreed. I believe that they were fighting, because it seems like they may have been in a type of relationship where they argued rather frequently, maybe.
Okay.
And in one of those relationships where maybe things got physical, where they kind of both maybe got physical.
Perhaps.
I'm not going to victim blame or anything, but this is just from limited.
Well, this is what we saw from the body cam
This is
footage.
what
is that they were kind of both admitting to
They're both admitting to it. Neither wants the other one to go to jail. I mean, I get it. Been in some situations kind of like that. It's just a big old thing but it would have been best if one of them went to jail that day, and maybe like gave them some time apart, right?
Might have helped
It
the
may have
situation.
saved her life. So I think they were arguing again, as they're wont to do in this relationship. And I think Brian just lost it because I think Brian was a big old baby coward who always wanted his way and, was always tucked up under mommy and daddy fixing
Can we
things.
just talk about what a broke ass bitch he was? He's on this road trip and he doesn't even have the funds to get home. He has to steal his girlfriend's credit card and her van to get his dumbass home.
After he's murdered her.
Like, talk about a fucking broke ass bitch.
So he lost it. They're in one of their fights. He loses total control. He strangles her to death. He was quite bigger than her. He strangles her, which is oftentimes a crime, if it is a crime of passion or a heat of the moment, strangulation.
It's a very personal
It's very,
crime.
very personal. But, and it's not easy to strangle someone.
No, we've talked about that multiple times here on the podcast.
It takes minutes and minutes to completely strangle someone to death. Plenty of time to, what am I doing? Oh my God. So he's a piece of shit. And then he kills her, and he's a broke-ass little bitch, like you said, and has to steal her belongings, her debit card, to drive back, running back to mommy and daddy with his little tail between his legs because he could never stand up and admit what he had done and accept the repercussions. He didn't have the decency to tell her family what happened, give them full closure and resolution. And I think his parents are a piece of shit too. I'm sorry.
Well, now he's a dead little bitch, so there's that.
And now, you know what? I hope at the very least, at the last moment before the life drained out of him, like some wild creature like shit on his face or something.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, cool.
I
Little
hope
muskrat.
he died with a bunch of mosquito bites.
Ooh.
Because I hate mosquitoes, and I hope that they were painful.
Okay, so Brian Laundrie is no more.
Have you heard about this true crime story? I'm just going to touch on it briefly. Out of Texas, where a mother and her boyfriend basically killed her child. Like, the boyfriend beat the boy to death. Mom watched this happen, didn't report it, then left her other 3 children abandoned in the apartment along with the skeletal remains of their brother.
Are you kidding me?
So mom and her boyfriend were out, like, just living their best life, I guess. Her name is Gloria Williams. She's 35. Her boyfriend is 31-year-old Brian Coulter, and they were arrested last week on Tuesday in connection with the death of her 8-year-old son. So, yeah, the boy's body was found last Sunday, so a week ago, after her 15-year-old called authorities to report that his younger brother had been dead for about a year and his body was in the room next to his. So when deputies arrive, they find the 3 kids, 15, 10, and 7-year-old, left behind in this apartment with their dead brother's remains.
And the dead brother's remains have been there for a year.
The apartment was in horrible condition, Dylan. Soiled carpet, absolutely no furniture, no bedding, no blankets. They had roaches, flies. It was in very bad condition. The children were taken to the hospital. They were malnourished. They showed signs of physical injury.
My God, this is a veritable house of horrors.
It totally is. The children who have special needs had not been in school since May of 2020. They determined that the 8-year-old had died of multiple blunt force trauma, and they believe that he was killed around Thanksgiving of 2020. Now, mom told investigators she didn't report her son's death because her boyfriend told her not to. The couple had moved out of the apartment earlier this year, and they lived about 25 minutes away.
So they just moved and left these kids there.
Yeah.
And oh, wow. So someone killed my child and they just told me not to report it. Those are lame ass excuses from someone like her in these situations. Or somebody should just slap the taste out of her mouth when she even says that dumb shit.
When asked why the boys didn't call authorities sooner, one of the investigators said that he believed it was just absolute fear, that the beatings were so consistent and they were mainly directed at the younger children, that the older boy, who was 15, was so absolutely afraid that he was hoping that his mother at some point would maybe snap out of this, would contact law enforcement, would intervene, and was just so afraid that that's why he didn't call police before.
Well, I mean, we can't blame this child. I mean, my God, this is just the worst of it. But there's just been ongoing abuse, physical, mental. I mean, this poor child. Yeah.
And although that Gloria Williams didn't physically abuse her children, the detective said that she's just as harmful to the children because that they're both an abuser. He's an abuser physically, and she's an abuser by omission.
Yeah, because the whole time these children are expecting their mom to protect them. And when she doesn't blatantly right there in front of them all, then what, you look to, when you're a child especially, you look to your parents as authority, as the they give you direction on everything. And when things go wrong, you look to them to fix it or at least try to, change the situation. So I could only imagine being a child in a situation like this and having your parent, and you have someone who's not your parent doing these things. Just watch and be silent.
The children are now in care of Child Protective Services, and both Williams and Coulter are behind bars. And so far, there's no attorney information released on the couple, but they are behind bars now, and I guess awaiting, trial.
Well, let's hope they find swift justice. These poor children have been removed, I'm sure, and are in state custody. And let's hope that they have a good experience with that. But they've got to be in a better place, right?
It's like just a really horrific story. And so that's been one of the big kind of true crime stories that I've been following this week. You're right, Dylan. It's like a house of horrors.
Oh, my God. Is veritable a word?
Veritable?
Does that mean is the root word variety? Look that up. Yeah, check it out.
Why? What do you want to do with the word veritable?
I think I used it.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
It's an intensifier often used to qualify a metaphor.
I used it right.
Okay.
I think.
Well, good for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like if someone was going to describe your pubic hair, they might call it a veritable forest.
That's a damn lie.
Okay.
I need to bring the equipment back through there, don't I?
Okay.
You brought my junk up. Good for you.
Well, it's been a while since we've talked about your junk.
Okay.
And I know that some folks out there wanted to know about your stinky jungle situation.
Yeah, we got to make a second pass on it.
Okay. Well, if you love Mountain Murders, can't get enough of us, you can always join us at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast for bonus content. Of course, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and we are going to start making some more videos on TikTok, and we will be bringing some more videos to YouTube of the show, some live videos recording the podcast. So that'll be fun, something that we've got in the works. I actually posted a test run video on Patreon about the Axemen of New Orleans.
Ooh, wee.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating story. If you're not familiar, you can check it out at Patreon. Also, Dylan, if folks want to get in touch with us, they can drop us an email at
mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com.
Cha-ching.
And if you're out there thinking, what's the very, very least I could do to help these two out with their little podcast? Well, you can leave us a 5-star review on any service that you're using to find our podcast. The kind words always make us feel great, and it keeps us going. You can also punch that subscribe button. You're going to listen anyway, and it really keeps our numbers flowing, and it helps us so much. That's the very, very least that our lovely listeners can do to help us out.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dylan.
Oh, yes. It's good to be back, right?
It is good to be back.
Man,
I mean, we had a nice break, but I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be discussing some true crime with you. And, of course, we dropped an offbeat this past week. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, it is the Amy Bradley mystery. A very peculiar story. Makes me very weary of cruise ships. And we will be back on Wednesday with another offbeat. I've got a good one this week.
Ooh,
Yeah, I think you're going to like it, Dylan.
baby.
Okay. So until then,
So,
hope everybody has a safe week. Hope you had a happy Halloween.
and hug them children.
Hug them childrens.